So JM Dub wants me to make it a series about toxic coworkers that you should avoid, or at least at the very minimum, keep your guard up around in your workplace. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones, and this is part 2. So one thing that I would certainly avoid at the workplace are coworkers who are outwardly sexually inappropriate. And surprisingly, I've seen this a lot with male supervisors, and I have avoided them like the plague. And it's something when it says a lot when a man is openly willing to say, oh man, she's got a tight little ass, or something like that, especially about someone that they're supervising or that they're working with. That lets me know that they're impulsive, that they're very bold and emboldened to do so, and that they're not thinking about the consequences of their job. And I'll tell you something else. When you've been doing my career as long as you have been, and you're as good at it as I am, I can sort of spot those personalities out right away. And my career, it almost comes full circle because, I've seen those same men that I've had those feelings about, that those implications have been there. A lot of them have been convicted or caught doing some sort of sex offense professionally, and they had to surrender their license and things like that. And it happens quite a bit in mental health, so just so you know, no one is exempt from that. It happens quite a bit in both mental health and the medical field, is what I'm trying to say. Tongue twister. And one woman from the last post mentioned about women who get angry, and that also has happened a lot. People who just get obscenely angry. They're triggered by the smallest little inconvenience, but their anger is over the top, so much so that they become explosive, or they're yelling, or they're throwing things, and especially if they're throwing things at you, or they're getting in your face. That is a very big concern, and that is someone that's also, just like the last scenario, is very impulsive, is also not in control, and they're not able to think through the consequences, and that's a big red flag. And a lot of times, depending on where you work, especially if you work in any sort of law enforcement or corrections or anything, anybody who works in those sort of fields knows that they have the strongest unions in the nation. So, they can even kill people and still not lose their job. Just something to be on the lookout for. And you want to definitely be able to navigate and move around and report that whenever possible. Of course, I know about the green or blue wall of silence and things like that. So I know that those can also be a thing where there is intimidation, and things like that. Stay away from brown nosers and tattletales. Again, if you're this happens a lot in environments, especially corporate environments, where there's like this crabs in a bucket mentality. Basically, you have all of these people trying to claw their way to the top by any means necessary to get a management position. And so if you have those people that are brown noses, that are constantly up their supervisors' butts, or they're sort of a tattletale and they're turning everybody in, know that their mission is to, turn the supervisor against everyone, just so that they can get their foot in the door to that supervisory position. And there's nothing that they're not willing to do to compromise your job or your position or your security within the company. They will turn on you faster than a mean rattlesnake, just to cover their butt and get good graces by everyone. And that also tells you, again, even if they were to get that supervisor position, what type of supervisor that they are. They're usually overbearing. They're cracking the whip on everyone. They're getting down on everyone, and they're people that they're very ego driven, and they just want what they want, and usually what that is to make a name for themselves and to climb the ranks. They're not really invested in working with a team or being a team player, but they're they show you very quickly that they don't have any problem with throwing anybody under the bus in order to get what they want. And I've seen people do a lot of cruel things, even in my field, to get ahead and try to make a name for themselves. So I always stick with the analogy that coworkers are not your friends. So there is that. So, and I worked in corrections, but I think this can apply across the board for anybody. Be cautious around people that struggle with over familiarity, meaning that they're quick to, butter up to somebody, and they're quick to chase validation, especially from master manipulators. If people are over familiar in my prison, that was a big red flag, or any prison or any jail setting, right? That means that they have an inappropriate relationship with an inmate or someone that's manipulative. So if you work in any other spot, that means that they could have an inappropriate relationship with anybody else whom they really don't know, and they're likely to turn quickly. So that means that they could be easily influenced and pressured by someone to, basically give that person what they want. So if somebody has a vendetta against you, that person will give out your address, right? If you guys have been friends, or if you've been cordial, if they know any personal information about you, they're quick to give all of that up just for a little bit of attention, or to get a little bit of validation, or power, or to likability, or whatever you want to call it. So people will turn on you just for the smallest little bit of attention. Stay away from loudmouths. I don't like to be around people who loudmouth, who gossip, who are very over the top with, things that are going on at home, things that they're doing with their husband that's sexually inappropriate, or things like that. And you would be amazed at some of the stuff that I've seen, or some of the stuff that I've seen people openly share about their private lives with employees, one, who they don't know, and two, people talk about it. Stay away from people that have sex with multiple coworkers in the workplace. And again, I know a lot of this is intimacy, but I don't know, like, there's somewhere along the way, jobs have become almost like a little club, or like a little hookup spot in a lot of places. I think it is kind of one of those things that it's a culture that you know about but don't necessarily talk about. But definitely I would strongly recommend that no one hook up with their coworker. First of all, especially if you're in a heteronormative environment, or if you're in a male dominated environment, which is basically where the men outnumber the women in environments, and one of the women hook up with the men. Oh, that's all bad. It's all bad, because one thing that I've learned is that men gossip way more than women ever do. They talk about everything. They tell everybody something. They become very competitive about it. They get together and they compare notes, and they're very open about doing this. So this isn't something that's a secret. If I know about it, that means that I've obviously overheard some conversations, right? Which means that they are very loud with it, and they can be very obnoxious and kind of gross about it. So if you want to carry your career far, you want to stay away from that kind of stuff, where people can be, can actually be downright cruel, and it can almost have that feeling of sort of like a frat house. But women can also talk about things like that, and just those sort of things get around, and then your reputation precedes you before you even walk in the door. Hope that helps.